Hi everybody, it's Steph from the Stellium Astrology podcast here, and today I am going to be answering a question from one of my patrons. Before I do, I just wanted to let you guys know that the draw for the Magic of I diary is soon approaching. However, I've decided to extend it slightly into December because personally I've got a few deadlines that are coming up, and I just want to make sure everything's done and dusted. But I do want to get that planner sent out to the winner of the draw before January, basically. So yeah, I won't let it drag too long. And what you need to do if you want to win a Magic of Eye planner is to subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is Stellium Astrology, and I'll put a link. There's a link in the bio, in the description below. And yes, if you have a private YouTube channel, then make sure you screenshot your subscription to my channel and email it to stephanie@stelliumastrology.com. That's STEFANIE at stelliumastrology.com. And I'll put you in the draw. Now, I don't know if I mentioned this previously, but patrons get 2 entries. So if you are a patron of mine, you're automatically going to be in the draw. And if you don't already subscribe to my YouTube channel, then I suggest you do, basically, because you get an extra draw. So with that said, let's talk about what one of my patrons asked me. So Allie, or Alexandria, I like your name, Alexandria, makes me think of the Library of Alexandria, full of all that wonderfully essential information to the evolution of mankind up until that point, which was lost in a rather tragic fire, or arson, really, more than anything, wasn't it? So Alexandria, you have said to me if it's possible to make astrology your one career without having to have it only as a side hustle. So the answer is yes, but it's not an overnight thing, unless of course you are somebody who's famous maybe and has the ability to broadcast your services to a wide audience, if there are certain exceptions to the rule, but generally speaking, becoming an astrologer as your full-time profession is not an overnight process. Even working in other fields, like for myself, as a trained hairdresser, when I started hairdressing, and I think it happened I think it was in 2013, I left my civil service job and I decided to start up mobile hairdressing. And I also got a job in a salon as well and trained up as a barber. But that to work in a salon is the best way to start as a hairdresser, because they already have a client base there and people coming in. It's somewhere that people know and go, oh, I'll pop in there and get my hair cut. But if you're working as a private hairdresser, a mobile hairdresser, where you literally have to generate your own business, you have to either be really good at marketing or have a lot of people who can spread the word for you. And it's a bit easier with hairdressing because a lot more people need their hair done, or want their hair done, than people are aware of what astrology can do. So even with hairdressing, it still takes a few years for you to build up a client base, and like get the word out there. So with astrology, similar principle. You have to be good at marketing, you have to sort of know how to reach your audience, and you also have to spread the word far and wide and be consistent about it. So you have to kind of let people know this is what you do and what you want to do. Somebody that I learnt with, when I went to, I don't speak about it a lot, but when I went to the Mercury Internet School of Psychological Astrology, I studied with them for a year, I think. I started off when they were the CPA, and then they changed up to MISPA, or the Mercury Internet School of Psychological Astrology. And John Green, the principal of the school, he said the best thing you can do is charge as soon as possible. So it depends what you consider a lot of money, and what you think your time is worth. But you mustn't forget to factor in, when you're coming up with costings, the time that it takes to prepare. And I'm not just talking about the time that it takes to analyze the chart, it's also generating the charts, printing them off, organizing the time that you're going to have with your client, So coordinating that, making sure if the time zones are different, that you both understand what time you need to turn up. You know, some of that can take hours actually. And then once you've done that, obviously there's sitting down and there's doing analysis. And once you've done all of the analysis, you know, feeling ready to go. Now, if you're new to astrology and you are very new to interpreting charts, I'd say practice, 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 practice. And then when you feel like you're ready to sit down and do an actual reading, then, then you can think about, well, maybe I should ask for an energy exchange, whether that is accepting a bottle of wine for the reading, or, you know, a box of chocolates, or if you're ready for, you know, to take the step and say, I am going to give you something that you are going to feel exchanging your money is worth. If you got to that point, then do it. Because, you know, everything in life is an energy exchange. And if you give and you don't get anything back, it can make you feel resentful or empty. So you need to exchange. There needs to be some kind of exchange. If I, you know, I said somebody spoke to me this week about they're setting up their own business. It's an art business. When I say setting up, they've just been commissioned to do their first piece of work. They don't know what to charge, whether they should charge, this, that, and the other. And I said, well, why don't you start off with donations and just, you know, have an idea of what you think is a reasonable donation. So if somebody says, well, what should I donate? Then you can do. And if you're not sure about that, you know, like, just let them donate whatever they want. If that will make you, you know, it's taking a step if you're not comfortable asking for money. And those of you with a Venus Saturn square are probably going to struggle with this. You know, those of you with like a Sun Venus conjunction or a Venus Saturn trine are probably going to understand it in a different way, but the ones with the square are probably going to have a real inner conflict about whether or not what they're offering is worth other people's money. And then maybe if you're a Virgo, for example, you may feel like you need to work at and craft what you're doing until it's perfect before you can really ask for, you know, anything in return. And, you know, taking smaller amounts of money in the meantime, or a smaller energy exchange is fine for you. So yeah, so those kind of things are worth bearing in mind. I think, I can't remember when I started accepting money for readings. I think I'd probably been a student. I did it quite soon. Because of the advice I'd been given. But, you know, I didn't, you know, I started off charging smaller amounts, and as time goes by, and, you know, you understand what you're doing, and, you know, you develop your specific areas of knowledge, then it's different. So I guess that gets that ugly subject of payment out of the way. The other thing I would say is understanding that you need to, you know, I think that it takes a while to really develop your client base, and, you know, it can take years. So I don't know many people, unless, like, you know, I spoke to Stephen Forrest the other day. I know he had an 8-year waiting list at one point that I looked, and then he'd closed it. I think when you've been around for a long time, you've written a lot of books, you've really kind of established yourself, then yes, you probably will turn people away. But I think it's probably a good idea to have a practical idea of what it is success means to you, as far as doing this as a full-time thing, or as opposed to a side hustle. Like, if you need it to be a full-time income, it might be that you have to do it with something else. Or, you know, if you've built up your client base over a number of years, then you can then, you know, you'll probably have returning people. I have people coming back for readings, and they're also sending new people for readings as well. So you do get that, you know, word of mouth. But it's all a process, basically. And it's one of those things I've kind of, as time's gone on, I've reframed success to myself so many times. I consider myself to be a successful professional astrologer. I have regular inquiries about readings. When I was on maternity leave, my waiting list was enormous and rather daunting, actually. And it helps if you are doing something to let people know what you're doing, and sometimes letting people know what to expect. One of the best things you can do is get social proof. So getting reviews and feedback, which is one of the things you can do for the energy exchange if you're looking to grow what you do. Having a website is kind of essential. So, you know, actually having a website that, you know, it takes a while to build one if you do it the way I did, but you can get stuff like Wix and Squarespace out now, which are much easier. It's kind of like a much easier way to develop a website. There are a couple of books that I would like to recommend as well. I've got Consulting with Astrology, and that's by Wendy Stacey, who is the principal of the Mayo School of Astrology. And also I've got The Professional Astrologer, and this book is by I think it's by Maurice Fernandez, but it doesn't say it's by him on here. It's compiled by the Organisation for Professional Astrology, OPA, and it's a really good book. I read it cover to cover. Like often with books, I pick them up. I don't read them cover to cover, especially astrology books, because it's so much information to take in. I pick them up and I put them down and I mull over things. But this was one I was able to read cover to cover while I was commuting to my job in London. And it's you know, it's got interviews in there with professional astrologers and how they became professional astrologers. I've just seen here as well contributors. Frank Clifford is in here. Who else is in here? Chris Brennan of the Astrology Podcast, Stephen Forrest, Maurice Fernandez, Melanie Reinhardt, who is the leading knowledge on Chiron. So lots of like very well known, and Wendy Stacey as well, who actually wrote this book. So lots of very well known astrologers have contributed to this book. There are interviews with people about how they became astrologers, you know, what they see as important. Ultimately, I think the type of person you're going to be as an astrologer is going to be in your chart. So, you know, have a look at maybe your 6th house and your 10th house, and see about, like, you know, the kind of work that you consider to be grind, but also daily ritual, and then have a look at what you consider to be profession, probably your idea of success and what you aspire to, your ambitions, represented perhaps by the midheaven and 10th house cusp. But also look at things like the moon. So, you know, what do you need, and what is your sun sign saying about you? You know, it will all describe a picture of, you know, the kind of astrology you want to be. And vocation is something that we have to explore with clients sometimes, and, you know, understanding what people are here to do to serve a sense of deeper fulfillment in somebody, more than just going out and paying the bills and putting a roof over their head, but actually doing something that feeds their soul, can be described by the chart as well. So it's worth having a look at that. There's a book by Faye Blake Cosser, called Vocational Astrology, or Vocation in the Horoscope. I have the book. I got it for my birthday last year. And I think there's also another book by Brian Clark. I might be wrong now, but I'm sure there's a vocation book by him. All of the links I'll include. But yes, I have to say, as far as like a manual for becoming a professional astrologer, this is a really, really good book. I would highly recommend you get this. And like I said, I read it from cover to cover. I've highlighted things. There's certain things. Budgeting is one of the things that I've highlighted. And there's other bits in here that I noticed I'd put a highlight on as well. Oh, here we are. Let's have a look. Let's see what I thought was worth remembering. It will be helpful to set 2 separate financial goals. You need to determine how much money you need to make in order to pay your expected monthly obligations, and then consider an approximate allotment to personal and professional development. And then here I've highlighted, a measure of discipline and routine is essential when you're working for yourself. That is true. And good work habits breed success. So this is a book that's a practical guide. It's not like, you know, just astrology. This is not an astrology book. It's a book about how to work with astrology in a practical way in order to make it your job. So yes, I consider astrology to be a job that I do, and it's no secret I also have another job as well. I currently work in the NHS. I have two I have 2 jobs, because I have a baby. I also have to pay bills and pay for him to go to nursery, so my NHS job covers the majority of that. But my astrology work once I've deducted all of the fees I pay for the website and you know, some of the things that I pay for, like the booking system that I use. You don't have to have one that you pay for, but I find it helpful to have that. Things like Zoom, which you have to pay for now if you want to use it for more than 40 minutes. All sorts of things that just come at a cost. You know, all of that stuff, even paying for the domain for your website costs money. So once I've, covered all of those costs, then whatever I make outside of that, after deducting my tax and national insurance, is my profit. But you know, it's something that, like I said, it takes a long time to build, and there are professional astrologers out there that do it. They do it as their only job. And you know, I'm not saying that you know, I will never ever do this as my only job and I will always work 2 jobs. You know, I can see that potentially this is, for me, a point where I may be doing this as my full-time job quite soon. But for me, my full-time job has changed because I now have a baby and now my job is part-time. And if I can do a job where it fits around my life better, then that's what I'll do. And that's what astrology does. It fits around me because I ultimately have the say over how I run my own practice. And that's the beauty of doing it, is that you will do what you need to run your own practice. One of the things I found very useful doing, which is something that a lot of businesses do, is creating their client avatar. I sat down one night and I, as detailed as possible, created an avatar for myself, for my business, my ideal client. And you can have more than one. You can create a number of avatars. But I sat down and I really went into detail about this type of avatar that I was looking for, this kind of person who would be my ideal client, somebody who really was into what I do, and you know, like resonated with certain values and that type of thing. And I'm serious about this. I finished my avatar. I even visualized a person, and the very next day I had somebody book in with me. Like, and this is when I wasn't getting a lot of bookings. They booked in with me the very next day, and it was like I literally summoned my avatar into my reality. This person just appeared and wanted to give me money for a reading, and she was exactly the person that I created in my avatar. And I thought it was very magical. And I do think that there's a lot of aspects of business, particularly successful businesses, that use a lot of techniques with modern labels for ancient names, like neuro-linguistic programming, which you could say is a form of chaos magic. You know, creating an avatar, for example, is like performing some kind of magical ritual, where you kind of focus and manifest. You know, it's kind of the law of attraction. So I do believe in creating an idea, having a really honest sit down and think about what it is you want from your business, what it is you want from your practice. If you don't really want to be inundated with people, because I have to be honest with you, sometimes reading people's charts can be quite exhausting. Like, it can take a lot from you, so you need to make sure you're not overwhelmed. The best way to do this is to do it slowly, slowly catchy monkey, because eventually you will develop your practice, and you'll have more control over it the more slowly you go, and you'll have more time to refine what it is exactly that you want to do. There is another option. I know lots of people that work on psychic hotlines and stuff. So if you've already got the skills and you feel ready to go, but you haven't got the client base, then you can join a psychic hotline and do it that way. That was some advice I gave somebody recently when they left their job and decided they wanted to be a tarot reader, but they were being forced to prove to the job centre that they could make a living out of tarot. And I said, psychic hotline, you'll get an hourly wage for that, and it's still doing what you love. So there's that as well. So yeah, really ultimately, you know, just in this winging it off the cuff episode where I've literally had not a long time to prepare, because my time lately has just been crazy. So this is a very short window of time that I've had to do this. You know, I have given you some nuggets, some food for thought. Probably not every single thing that I could encourage you to do, but this is a very short window of time, like I said, so I can't cover it all. It's not a webinar, it's not a course, it's a podcast. Just to touch on what it is that I'm doing here with the podcast. It's free content for you guys. I try to cover and give you as much value as possible in a short space of time. Sometimes it's a bit longer than others, but just so you're aware, like I've shared, I don't just do this as my one job. The podcast is actually a passion project. I make no money from the podcast, and getting it out there for you guys on a weekly basis is something that I endeavour to do, and I try to do it with a bright spirit, with a good attitude, and to give you something worthwhile that you can go away and think about, and develop your own personal opinions or practice around it. I have had some feedback that it's too chatty and that people would rather that I just get to the point. But my process is my process. This is just how I do it. I remember when I used to give my sister readings, I'd look at her chart and I'd look, and it took a while for it to come together for me. So I'd be looking at her going, you've got sun here and you've got moon there. And she'd go, but what does it mean? And I'm like, you can't rush this process. You have to let me articulate it. And this was a long time ago, like, whereas now I can kind of zoom in very quickly. But it's one of those things that it takes time to develop. And if you're somebody who part of the process is talking, myself being a Mercurial Gemini rising, 2 jobs, that kind of person that sort of like has a bit of variety, because that's what I need in my life. One of the ways that my thought process is it gets moved along is by talking. And also, I'm a storyteller by nature because of that Mercury Venus in Aquarius. I'm somebody that likes to share my stories with my friends, and being a Gemini rising, part of the learning process and part of the teaching process, because by my nature I'm learning by doing this podcast, but also I'm teaching. It's just part of the duality of learning. You also share what you learn and teach others at the same time. It's just part of the process for me. So I'm glad those of you that are here and enjoying the stories. I do apologize to those of you who aren't loving the conversational aspect of this podcast. It is a conversational podcast. It's not a class. It's not a webinar. It's not a presentation. It's just me doing my thing. There are some really good podcasts out there that are probably straight to the point. I would recommend doing some exploring if you'd rather not listen to some of my own personal anecdotes and stuff like that. But that being said, it's been a very interesting eclipse season for me. I've done a lot of personal reflection, and at the end, on the full moon eclipse, I actually had a really lovely moment of synchronicity where I ended up on a Reiki refresher course, refreshing my Reiki master knowledge and getting back into the cleansing, grounding, and healing practice, which takes about 3 weeks. And I'm just in the throes of all of that at the moment, and I'm actually overwhelmed with a lot of stuff to do, so juggling, but actually really enjoying getting back into to healing myself with Reiki. So it's been a very healing time. So thank you to everybody for your positive feedback. Thank you everybody for your constructive feedback. I hope that this episode's given you some food for thought, and that actually you can go away, maybe get a couple of books, particularly the Professional Astrologer, Building a Successful Astrology Practice, compiled by the Organisation for Professional Astrology. I really loved this book. It was such a good book to have. And like I said, cover to cover. Look at this. Look what I've just found in there. Stonehenge and Ancient Astronomy. Nice little leaflet. I've got them there for some reason. It's a really, really good one, and highly recommended. Don't forget to join, subscribe to the YouTube channel if you'd like to be put into the draw for the Magic of Eye Diary, and patrons, you get to. Alexandria, I hope this answered a question for you, and perhaps I can answer some other questions that you posed to me in some future episodes. This was just one of those random, off the cuff, just found the time to record it episodes. So take care, thank you for asking the question, and I'll speak to you next time.